A very warm welcome to one and all. I'm Dr. Anu Vashish, Membership Director at Sinodent, and I'm hosting today's session with Dr. Prateek Bam. He is the TMU College President and he's co-host with me. Sinodent is a unique platform, and thanks to Dr. Anmol Bagaria, CEO and founder of Sinodent, who has taken this initiative to organize amazing sessions for all of us. Sinodent is a digital healthcare ecosystem that provides access to healthcare and enables a real-time appointment scheduling system. From doctors, medical practitioners, diagnostic lab to radiological services and pharmaceutical services, Sinodent brings it together to all at economic prices and even at minimum waiting time. Sinodent brings together a platform with precious and healthy smile for all the patient with minimum effort and maximum welfare. It is an initiative that will put up all efforts to create beautiful smile on patient face all the time. Now the patients don't have to fear for those long queues or busy dentists when they have got toothache. Now, let us begin with the amazing and exhilarating webinar on TMJ, and let me welcome our esteemed guest speaker for today, Dr. Sanjay Arora sir. Sir is a craniosacral dentist. His practice is focused on TMJ. He is the CEO at Zental TMJ and Body Pain Treatment Center. He has got special interest in dental occlusion and TMJ disorder and the whole body connection. He maintains a private practice in South Delhi and train the trainers. It is famous about him that whichever course he has gone to attend in TMJ dentistry, the trainer has almost asked him to present his philosophy and protocols. So I would like to welcome sir to begin with his session.
So am I on? Am I visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hi, good evening. And I believe there are people from other side of the world. So good morning to them. And it may be, for some people, it may be good afternoon. So today, we're going to take up a very interesting topic of dental occlusion, its connection to the temporomandibular joint disorders, and its connection to the whole body diseases. So I hope I will be able to do justice to this. And so let's start quickly because we just have 1 hour. So I'll begin. Will there be a question answer session also? One more?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We'll
So
be having a question.
I have 45 minutes to complete.
No, sir, you can take your time. You can complete by 9 and we can then start the question hour session.
Okay. So is my screen visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to first of all begin with the certain basics, and I want to start the right way. Okay. So, generally speaking, dentists basically believe that temporomandibular joint disorder basically means pains in and around ear and face. This is the first set of doctors who believe that TMJD means this. Then there are another set of doctors who believe that there is an involvement of head and neck as well. Then there's a third set of doctors who believe that almost all body pains and several medical diseases are also caused by the temporomandibular joint disorder. So, for the ones who think it is pains in and around the ear and face, basically all are correct. But there is a large evidence being thrown up lately that almost all the chronic body pains and several other medical diseases are probably connected to the temporomandibular joint disorder. There are a lot of evidences being thrown during the last 70 years on this subject. Now, mostly people believe that temporomandibular joint disorder is basically correctable by some exercises, or they believe that there is surgical role of a surgeon here, and a surgeon is required to correct the temporomandibular joint disorder, or others who believe in splint therapy. And there are, correcting the dental occlusion, although a lot of people talk about it, but they find it like really difficult, because occlusion, as you all guys know, has been a difficult subject for most of the dentists in the dental school. So I'm going to here today talk about mainly it is the role of dental occlusion, and correcting the dental occlusion can correct most of the temporomandibular joint disorders, and almost 80 to 90% can be corrected in a very short span of time. So can this PowerPoint presentation be seen by everybody? Are you able to see the PowerPoint presentation, Anwar?
Sir, only what you're typing is visible.
This PowerPoint is not visible?
No, it's visible now, sir.
Now it is visible?
Yes.
Okay. So we begin with the, basically, can you see the full slide or no? Are you able to see the half open slide or the full slide?
Oh, sir, half. You have to start the slide share.
I have to. Okay. Now the full slide is available?
That's perfect.
Okay, great. So,
yes, sir. Now it's completely visible.
Okay. So, this is one very, very important question if you want to understand the dental occlusion in a completely different manner than that has been taught in the dental school. Doctor, an anxious patient comes to you and says, "Doctor, my child goes clickety-clacking her teeth in the night time. What do I do?" I'm sure you guys have faced this kind of a situation where you have received such a patient. And if you can answer this one single question, then you will be able to answer a lot of questions on dental occlusion, and your understanding of the dental occlusion will jump many folds. Are the people able to respond to my queries, or should I just keep going on? Anmol? Anyway, so the textbooks, they typically talk about, if you go to the textbooks of oral medicine, they will talk about that, there are worms in the gastrointestinal tract of the child, and the child needs to be taken to a gastroenterologist for deworming, or there are some psychological disorders or attention deficit disorders. This is normally what the dentists or the dental textbooks talk about. The suggestion is definitely not correct. Another situation where an adult comes to you and he has the same complaint that throughout the night and sometimes in the daytime, he's grinding his teeth, and the noise that is being produced is so high that there have been certain divorces in the world due to that. Dentists would normally go for, treatments like night guards. Somebody would go for a soft guard. Somebody would advise a psychological therapy. Then there are textbooks which talk about lateral pterygoid block and whatnot. However, these suggestions mostly are not correct. These kind of splints are advised, but these suggestions are basically incorrect. Then you get such patients where there is a massive damage on the teeth, and for decades, the dentistry has basically blamed toothbrushing, muscular toothbrushing, as the cause of these cervical lesions. They have typically called this as dental toothbrush abrasion. Is the suggestion correct? Of course, it is not correct. Yeah. So, you want to say something? Okay. So then there are patients who come to you with severe attrition, and I've seen typically dentists saying that it is due to heavy bite or sandy foods. Let me tell you that this is not true. Dental attrition does not have anything to do with heavy bite. In fact, perhaps there is heavy bite may be outcome of attrition, but not the other way around. Then there are situations where the ceramic on ceramic laminate or ceramic over a crown chips off, and we typically blame the dental laboratory for that. It has nothing to do with the dental laboratory. It has something to do with basically the dental occlusion. Now, what am I trying to come to? I'm trying to come to a point where I'm going to tell you this is a problem of mechanics. This is a problem of force dissipation. Whenever the force is in the mouth, which can climb up to 1,000 megapascals, let me tell you how much is 1,000 megapascals. If you take a small Diwali cracker or crackers which are burst in several festivals, and a small cracker, if you hold it in your hand and it would burst there, then it is enough to actually fracture your bones and tear away the flesh completely, destroy it completely. Now that is what is 1,000 megapascals of force. Now imagine that much of megapascal of force is generated in almost every dental bite on a food bolus. And rarely does your system come to know that there is this kind of a force being exerted in every dental bite. A masticatory bite. A masticatory bite would be different than a normal bite, because a masticatory bite would be against the food bolus, and the harder the food, the harder the bite. So, if this 1,000 megapascal of force, for some reason, is not able to be dissipated correctly, then it would lead to primarily the damage of the dental occlusion, what would be known as occlusal disorders. We will talk about it. And if the teeth are able to take these forces and dissipate them correctly, then the next stop then it is very well. But if for some reason the teeth are not able to dissipate these forces, then the next step for these forces would be the muscles, and or rather I would say that the periodontal structures or the bones would be the next stop. And if the bones also are not able to dissipate these forces correctly, then the next stop would be the muscles. And when the muscles also are not able to, for some reason, able to dissipate these forces, then the next stop would be the joint. And when the joint also gives in, then the rest of the body starts suffering. We'll come to that. So quickly, I'd like to show you certain videos here. I'm a little bad with the Zoom, so you will have to forgive me for being a little lousy on this. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to open up some movies and then going to shut them till I find the right one. I'm so sorry if there is some technical problem when I have started the Zoom. Give me a moment, please. Okay, can you see this video? Can you see this video?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can you see this video?
Yes, sir, it was visible.
Okay, just 1 second. So sorry. Okay. Is this visible? Is this video visible? Is the
Yes,
video
sir.
visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir, it's visible.
Now, now you see, this set of teeth are not able to make any grinding sound. And that is because of these two interrupting teeth. And as you know, this is called as a canine guided occlusion. So whenever there is a canine guided occlusion, then there is no possibility of the posteriors grinding against each other during any kind of a lateral or a forward movement. As long as canine guidance, and I'm going to talk about another subject soon, the anterior guidance are intact, the posteriors will not grind against each other, and hence an adult or a child with a canine guided occlusion will not be able to brush. So canine guidance would prevent a lateral excursion, a lateral grinding, and anterior guidance would prevent an anterior forces to be producing a sound or a grinding on the posterior teeth. So I hope you get that. And if we were to grind away these, canines, or imagine if these canines were at a wrong place, then what would happen? Now in this video, you see the canines tips have been ground away. So imagine if this canine were not in a class 1 relationship, and the canine was, one of the canines was missing or extracted or placed slightly forward or backward. So what would happen is that all the posterior teeth will grind against each other, causing what is famously known as bruxism. Since I don't know how many people are hearing, and so I'm used to presentations where somebody would say yes or no or maybe. So Anu and Pratik, may I request you to at least because at least let me know you got it or not, okay?
Yes, sir.
And if you have a question, you can ask, so it feels a little more lively. I'm used to very interactive presentations. I'm not used to these kind of presentations. So got it? So the answer is this. Just a second. I'm sharing the screen. Why I'm not able to see it? Huh? Can you see the PowerPoint presentation? No.
No, sir. Only your main screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Where is the...
Sir, at the bottom, probably.
Can you see my picture with my daughter?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That is visible.
That is visible. So why is the PowerPoint presentation not visible? Joseph. Now can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Now.
So the saviors are well-placed canines. They act like check valves. I would like to add to the statement that the saviors are well-placed canines and anteriors. So it is the anterior teeth which protect the posterior teeth and the posterior teeth which protect the anterior teeth. This is called as the mutually protected occlusion. Now, so they must be well placed. They must be placed in a relationship which is such that it does not destroy the occlusion. Okay, I'm just giving you a rough sketch right now. Time permitting, I'll be able to give you a better sketch. But understand that the positioning of the teeth is critical for the health of the posterior teeth. And when the anterior teeth are not correctly placed, then the posterior teeth give up. I'm going to show you how they give up. And when the posterior teeth give up, then the forces travel to, let me repeat it again. If the abnormal forces are there on the posterior teeth, then posterior teeth, if they give up, then the forces get absorbed there. But if they don't give up and the forces are abnormal, then the forces travel to the next stop, and the next stop is the muscles. And if the muscles also are not able to handle that, then they travel to the temporomandibular joint. So let me now quickly jump, because the time is less. So let me quickly jump to So, imagine if you have a foot made of, I'm sure you dentists have noticed that sometimes it is very easy to cut upon a foot when you are doing a crown preparation. And sometimes the brand new burr, the best burr, and you are just not able to cut with that diamond point or abrade with that diamond point at all. So it is hard tooth material versus a soft tooth material. So if the tooth material were to be soft, and as you saw in the video, if the canines or the anterior teeth were not to provide the disocclusion that they were providing, then there will be a grinding force on the posterior teeth like this. This grinding force will do what? You guys can participate, please. What will this kind of a grinding force, which would come because of the absence of the correct positioning of the anterior teeth or the absence of the anterior teeth, in a situation where the tooth material is soft, it would cause something called as attrition. right? So it has nothing to do with a heavy bite or a hard food. It is diamond hardness grinding against the diamond hardness, which is the hardness of the human enamel, which is almost equal to the hardness of the diamond. And when that is able to grind against each other, then diamond can be ground by only the diamond, and hence the tooth abrasion takes place. Food does not have the ability to grind the tooth material unless we were, unless it's an animal who is eating absolutely sandy food, because sand and the dust that is harder than it's like a high viscid ceramic. So it is a high viscid ceramic, in fact, and that can attrition the tooth. And modern man does not eat the sandy diet. So, if the tooth material were to be hard, and this kind of a force were to come because of the absence of the anterior teeth or the bad positioning of the anterior teeth, then that would lead to bending of the tooth structure, and the bending of the tooth structure would lead to fracture in this area, and that fracture is called as abfraction and not with brush abrasion, and that would cause what is called as cervical cavities. It is not cervical erosion, it is not cervical abrasion. Brush of the toothpaste does not have the hardness to grind away human enamel, which has a hardness equivalent to diamond, and the bending of the tooth structure that would take place would cause fracture in this area, causing abfraction. Now imagine if the tooth were such that the root was short or straight and tapering, then that simply means that the grip of the tooth into the bone is less. And whenever there will be a grinding force because of the absence of the anteriors into the correct position or their total absence, then what would happen is tooth material is hard, embedment into the ground is less, that will lead to tooth mobility. And so this is the primary reason, this is the only reason for the tooth mobility and the main contributor to the periodontal disease. And that would cause the bone to, move away, give away, and that is why there will be tooth mobility. I hope you guys are getting it. Yes. If there is any question, please do ask, so that maybe those are the questions for the people who may be, seeing this presentation right now or later on.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So what do you say? Why would this child grind the teeth at the night? In the night, because she is not 13 yet, and at 13 the eruption of the canines takes place to the correct position, and at 13 she will stop grinding the teeth. So clear? Up to head? Yeah? Okay. I love to hear yes or no or maybe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So good. So now we understand that correct positioning of the canines and the anterior teeth is very important. So now we need to see what is this correct positioning. Okay. So I'm going to shift you to another screen. Can you see the skull?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know whether we'll be able to play with it. Okay. Let me go to okay. So now you have understood the basics of the dental occlusion. So it is the positioning of the anterior teeth. I will stress it again and again. which is critical. Now, I come back to the positioning of the anterior teeth a little later. So if the positioning is incorrect, then it will cause damage to the posterior teeth, to the muscles, to the temporomandibular joint. Now, let me first establish the connection between the dental occlusion and the temporomandibular joint disorder and the whole body, and then I'll come back to what should be the positioning of the anterior teeth. So, give me a moment, please. Right. So, can you guys how do I so can you see a temporomandibular joint?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So I'm going to play this. How can I switch off the sound of this? Okay. There is a background sound that will be coming. I don't listen to that sound and look at the temporomandibular joint from a completely different point of view. So this is the ball. This is the socket of the joint for the newcomer, for the freshers and final year students. And consider, I want you to look at the temporomandibular joint as a physics problem or an engineering problem rather than a biological problem. Think it is a hinge of a joint, hinge of a door joint. I mean, it's the hinge of a door. And do not look at it biologically. Look at it as a mechanical problem, design problem. So if you were to look at it, this is a ball, this is the socket, and there is a cushion in between. Forget about the ligaments and this and that. Let's take a fresh look at how it operates. Forget whatever you have read in the textbooks and take a look at it from an engineer's point of view. So what is happening is when the mouth opens, this ball shifts forward, slides forward, it rotates as well as slides forward, and as the mouth closes, it comes back to its position. Let me see if I can switch off this sound. It will make a lot of sense. Huh? Yeah. So can you guys hear me? Pratik, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, just shake your hand if you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
good. So this ball moves forward when the mouth opens, and this is where the teeth basically clench against each other. This is the point where the clenching takes place. So the maximum force takes place at this point. And that is the reason this cushion is the thickest in this area. And there is the least force at this point because the opening of the mouth takes place against the gravity. And during the closure, this is the place where the highest force is there. Now imagine if teeth were to grind more on one side compared to the other side, then the lower jaw or the lower teeth, instead of seating like this, would seat like one side first and then the second side. There will be tilt. This and this, this and this. Now the tilt would take place at the clenched position. because that's where the final settlement of the jaw would take place, and hence would cause force into this area. When that would be so, what would happen is that the disc or the cushion would slip away. You see that cushion is no more present here. So as the mouth opens, we see the disc, we see the condyle moving forward, sliding forward, and during the closure cycle, what happens is that the condyle shifts downwards, and it shifts downwards because muscles of mastication, they take hold of the jaw, change its angle of closure to crush against the ball of the food. So they adjust their angle, and due to that, the condyle axis shifts downwards, thereby giving space for the disc to slip back. And you see the disc has slipped back here. And as the clench takes place again and the tilt takes place again, the disc would slip away again. So opening cycle, condyle shifts downwards, the disc comes back, the closing cycle, the tilt and the disc will slip away again. So this cycle keeps continuing. Now, how deep is this disc? You know, this disc is almost 1.5 inches deep. That is, it goes inside. The disc can, depending upon various permutations and combinations of the force direction. Remember the word, the force direction, which would be given by the set of teeth which grind away or are absent in the mouth. This seminar is too small for establishing the relationship of what is called as vector, the direction of the force. The disc would slip in either the forward direction or sideways or anteromedially or medially or posteromedially. So depending upon the force on the disc would slip whenever there would be an abnormal force on the disc. In this case, the disc has shifted medially. That is, it has gone inside. 1.5 inches of the disc, even if it were to go 50% inside, you know, outside, there's a thick wall, which is called as ligament. And so it's coming outside is prevented, but on the inner side, there's a very thin membrane. So the disc can even tear that membrane and go inside. Where did it go is the million-dollar question. What are the structures lying inside is the million-dollar question. So let's take a look. This is the base of the skull. And this is that ball of the joint. And this is the socket of the glenoid fossa or the temporal fossa. It's called as the temporal fossa because it is in the temporal bone. And in between this ball and this socket was the 1.5 inch deep disc that you are seeing. Now that disc can slip in the forward direction, can slip in the anteromedial direction, can slip in the medial direction, can slip in the posteromedial direction, depending upon which tooth structure has been lost or which teeth are absent. So the force, whichever direction it will act in, or this disc is basically attached to a muscle called as lateral pterygoid. It is an extension of that muscle. So if there was a spasm in the lateral pterygoid muscle, which travels, this muscle travels from here to here. And if there was a spasm in that muscle, an extra force generating ability, or it was livid, the muscle was not able to exert the proper force, the disc would accordingly shift in that direction as well. So there will be a pull or a push force on the disc. So here lies the trigeminal nerve. coming out of the foramen ovale, which is on an average 0.5 to 0.75 centimeter away from the border of the temporal fossa or the glenoid fossa. So if the disc were to travel forward, there are localized pains on opening of the mouth. I'll explain later. Imagine it's like a piece of cloth stuck in the door and near the hinge. So the door would not be able to open. So if the disc were to travel forward, then the jaw would not be able to open because the disc will hinder the opening, and the opening will cause the pain. When the opening is causing the pain, that is, the disc is under the pressure, and this is pathogonomic. That is, opening of the mouth causing the pain is pathogonomic of the disc shifting forward anteriorly. If the disc were to shift anteromedially, it would cause the most famous disease, the trigeminal neuralgia. Because the trigeminal nerve is coming out of this foramen and traveling backwards into the jaw, particularly the mandibular division. So depending upon the force with which the disc travels anteromedially, or the position of the foramen ovale, which may be slightly posteriorly, because it can be 0.5 to 0.75 and sometimes 1 centimeter away, the chances of trigeminal neuralgia or migraines, which is currently believed to be caused due to the inflammation of the trigeminal nerve, would be the result. Now, here lies the middle meningeal artery. Here lie the C1, C2 fibers. Here lies the internal carotid artery, and along with it comes out the sympathetic trunk, which is supplying to which is responsible for the entire sympathetic supply to all the visceral organs of the body. Coming out of the carotid canal, and notice that the carotid canal is touching the border of the glenoid fossa. Then if you come slightly posteriorly, this is the foramen lacerum, and this is the exit of the accessory nerve or the 11th cranial nerve. This is here slightly laterally is the vagus nerve, and more laterally is the glossopharyngeal nerve. And if you come posteriorly, this is the internal jugular vein, which is responsible for draining the dirty blood of the brain. And according to the current concepts of multiple sclerosis, there is some problem in the drainage of the venous blood of the brain, considered to be the cause of the trigger of the autoimmune disorder of the multiple sclerosis. So you can see these vital structures are lying just next to the condyle and the temporomandibular joint assembly, and the disc, which is 1.5 inches deep, can enter into this infratemporal fossa most of the time up to 0.75 inches, and for this you need an MRI from a completely different direction. 99% of the MRIs are taken from this view, which is just a sagittal view, which is of no importance to us. It has to be taken from either the backside, the coronal view, or an axial view to be able to see. But it is only of an academic value that the disc is traveling inside. But it is well catalogued that the disc travels medially, and this is responsible for the whole body connection. Am I clear up to here?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
sir.
Right. So let's look at this lady. She was suffering from migraine for 10 years and right side knee pain for 10 years. Now, if you look at the electromyography, this is called the left side pictures. This is called as T-scan. It's a computerized pressure scan of the teeth. And on the right side, you see the electromyographic activity, and both are coordinated on the time scale. Now, I don't know whether you are able to see the bigger picture. I'm going to expand the slide so that you can, oh, I'm so sorry, it just went away. Okay, so if you can see the right temporalis, which is the red upper muscle, electrical activity, and this is the left temporalis. Let me make it bigger for you. No. Okay. Let me. There's a slide here. Okay. Now I'm going to make it a little bigger for you. Is it bigger? Can you see bigger?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you guys.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Okay. Now, if you see here, so sorry, I'm not able to shift. But if you can see the right temporalis muscle, the electrical activity is much larger, almost 3 times larger than the electrical activity in the left temporalis, confirming the right side headaches to the patient. And if you look at the left side of the T-scan, it's a digital pressure scan of the teeth. It shows the percentages of the forces on various teeth. This line here, the red line, is basically showing the direction of the force, or what is called as a vector. So, this small square here shows the end point of the vector, which means that the first side to meet in the mouth was the left side of the patient, and the last tooth to meet was somewhere on the right hand side, back side. So this vector is traveling from left to the right side. So it says that the patient was closing left first and then the right. It was happening in micro seconds, and this T-scan can measure that. Now this should have been the front backwards. That is, the front teeth are supposed to meet first. Very few prosthodontists realize that the teeth which are supposed to meet first are the anteriors, because they are angular teeth and they are designed to take the angular forces. We will come to that in a few moments. And if these teeth were to be, the first to contact, and then if there was a right-left balance, then this line should have traveled from forward to the center here. When this happens, then when the anterior teeth touch first, then they deprogram or they switch off the muscles at the moment they touch each other. I don't know whether the time will permit or not, but let me give you an insight here. The front teeth are angular teeth, and whenever angles collide against each other, they are not able to put a lot of force onto each other. And if you were to try to climb the mountain, so on the slope, your legs will not be able to put much force onto a slope surface, and so your leg muscles go deprogrammed, or they are not able to put the force. So if the front teeth were to meet at the correct point at the first, then the muscles of mastication are supposed to switch off as soon as the front teeth are supposed to come in contact. So let's see this next slide. In this slide, you see now the same vector is coming forward to backward in the center, and look at the right temporalis activity before and now. Let's go back. This was the right temporalis activity before, and this is the right temporalis activity after the vector is corrected. So the migraines stopped happening then and there. All right. The connection with the whole body and her right side knee pain, it's too short a time for me to explain. But let me shift to something else quickly. So this is called as joint vibrational analysis. This is the right joint of the same patient, and you can see there is a horizontal line. It's like a digital stethoscope which is trying to hear what is happening inside the joint. The patient is asked to open and close the mouth, and it is like a digital stethoscope. And you can see there is a horizontal line in the right joint, while the left joint has some pink lines. I don't know whether you're able to see that or not, but there are a lot of big vertical pink lines. Can you see that? This shows that the disc is moving inside. Okay, there is something inside which is moving. And post the treatment, you can see that both right and the left temporomandibular joint do not have any noise at all. That is, the disc is not moving. So it confirms the muscle stopped working and the disc stopped moving, confirming that the patient is rid of the problem. So let me now shift to go back to the positioning of the front teeth, which I said is the most important thing. Now we have roughly 10 minutes. So just give me a few seconds. I could. Okay. So
check if you have good anterior guidance, that's having a drop forwards or maintaining contact with your front teeth.
okay, so
Sir, it's not visible.
yeah, just 1 second. So can you now see the video?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So observe, this is how a normal masticatory bite takes place. Front teeth during the mastication touch first. Notice that. Okay. Whenever there is a food bolus, the jaw moves a little forward to crush against the food, and comes from a certain angle, and then the crushing takes place. This first touching of the front teeth, which are placed anteriorly, guides the jaw to the correct seating position. This is called as anterior guidance. This is called as the anterior guidance. It has three important functions. One, it guides the jaw where to sit such that the cusps meet the fossa vertically in the last 0.2 millimeter of the closure of the occlusion at the tripods, at the exact spots. Suppose this was not there, then there will be some degree of a lateral component and there will be a certain degree of a slide that could take place. And that would grind the teeth away or shake the teeth away. Because, as you see, this bomb exploding is the amount of force that is there while the masticatory bite is taking place. So, the anterior guidance basically is not catching the ball like this, which is like with a straight hand, but catching a ball, I'm sorry, I'm not able to see where that video is, but basically able to catch the ball with a complete body movement at an angle. See here, observe, I got the video. So you can see that the whole body is at an angle while catching the ball. So this dissipates the forces correctly. And if the forces are not dissipated correctly, it would lead to the damage to the skin, bone, muscles, and the joints. So do we have time, or do we have 5 minutes, or?
Sir, we can take it, we can stretch it to 10 minutes more, no problem.
All right. So you see, now mostly the dentists think that anterior guidance is when they ask a patient to grind the teeth forward and if there is a posterior disocclusion, then that means there is a presence of anterior guidance. This is absolutely incorrect. I've seen some top people, some top videos talking about this. This is incorrect. This is called as protrusive guidance. This is not anterior guidance. And in life, we don't do this motion. Unless you are a known case of bruxism, this motion is not done. Anterior guidance can only be checked with the help of a T-scan, or if you have a 0 millimeter space overjet, 0 millimeter overjet, which is, like this. The definition of overjet is also given wrong in everywhere, including Dawson. It is the horizontal distance, minimum horizontal distance between upper and lower anteriors, and not between the tip of one tooth and the surface of another tooth, which is incorrect. It is the minimum horizontal distance, and it should be the textbook recommendation of 2 millimeter is absolutely wrong, because if there was a 2 millimeter gap, then this is the amount of play available between the posterior teeth, and that will grind away and it will eventually lead to what is called as the long centric. So this has to be 0. And even this is a 0 overjet, and even this is a 0 overjet. This is the 0 overjet which is supposed to be there, so that as soon as the teeth were to move forward, as soon as so the mouth has to open up, the posterior have to disocclude. Am I making some sense? So,
yes, sir.
So, now coming down to the, so if the anterior guidance were to be absent, then this is what observe here, the whole of the front part of the car in the modern cars crumbles if there was to be an accident, impact, and this temporomandibular joint disc gets saved in the process. The forces do not come to the disc. Imagining if this was a temporomandibular joint and this portion was the occlusion, observe, if the forces were dissipated at the occlusion level correctly, that is the anterior teeth were to meet first, then they dissipate the forces such that there is no damage to the driver. This is called as crumpling effect. The forces are crumpled into various directions so that there is no load onto the disc, and if there was a load onto the disc, then the disc will travel, and this is called as internal derangement of the disc. And the disc, when it will travel, it can travel forward, anteromedially, medially, posteromedially. Yeah, and sometimes there is lateral movement also there. Now observe, when the force crumpling does not take place, like here, you can see that there is a damage to the disc. There is a force on the disc, and the force will move the disc. I hope I have made the concept, basic concept clear. Now it's a too big a subject, so I would like to leave you guys with one or two thoughts in your mind, which will help you in correcting a lot of cases. And what I would like to suggest is, one, you must have a T-scan in your practice. Must. Number two, you must insist on having a canine guided occlusion primarily. And the second important thing is the anterior guided occlusion. You must avoid extraction of the teeth, particularly the third molar, as far as possible. There are modern techniques available where the third molar with less space can also be made to erupt. You can use epigenetic orthodontics, which can even make the jaws grow and create space even in an adult, late adulthood, even in the old age, and the tooth can be erupted into the correct position. Because in the patients who are standing at the edge of creation of a temporomandibular joint disorder, even the slightest damage to the occlusion by extraction of a tooth or slight grinding of a tooth can cause an immediate initiation of the disease. And in the patients who are standing far away from, imagine somebody is standing on a mountain and he's standing at the edge of the fall into the valley. So this person has an occlusion which is easy to become a temporomandibular joint disordered occlusion. So somebody can push this person slightly and he would fall, he will tumble. But if another person is standing 10 feet away, it is not easy. So that is why you sometimes don't find patients becoming a temporomandibular joint disordered patients after extraction or changing the occlusion. So all the occlusions which are class 2, div 1 occlusions, open bite occlusions, are very, very, very prone to temporomandibular joint disorders. And any kind of a grinding of a tooth structure or an extraction of a tooth structure, where basically the anterior guidance is not available in such cases. Anterior teeth, when they touch, when the overlap is more than 3 millimeter and there is a 0 millimeter of gap between the anteriors, such occlusions are not easy to produce a temporomandibular joint, although even they can be, they can also produce the temporomandibular joint disease. But preference of not extracting the tooth, preference of insisting on zero overjet correction, preference of correction of a 3 millimeter of overbite, 0 millimeter overjet, canine guidance primarily, and then anterior guidance. These are some of the important factors which you have to remember, which will help you. And you know, when most of the, I've seen talk conferences where they would talk about occlusion, they'll say, tell the patient, 3-4 din mein you'll start feeling all right, you know. Now, he will definitely start feeling all right as far as biting is concerned. But if you were to check his leg or his, you know, shoulder or an ear, it would start troubling him. And unluckily, orthodontists do not see the patients above 22, much above 22. And we seldom ask these things from the patient, whether any, you know, whole body pain or anything develop. And I'm open to questions by anybody. I'm open to training anybody free of cost anytime. If anybody is practicing temporomandibular joint, or they want to practice and they want to learn this, I don't charge anything from anybody, and it's an, you know, they can learn this modality anytime. It is a vast modality. It will take time. You need to have patience. I have had some top practitioners calling me, अच्छा इस केस में क्या बता दो करना है, उसको कभी किया नहीं है, and they just want to know from one phone call. It's not possible. You can grow yourself into that. I hope I was useful. With this, I would like to end my presentation. If there is any question, I would like to address it at this point of time.
Yes, sir. So thank you so much for sharing your vast knowledge and experience with all of us. So we have a few questions from the delegates that have joined. Yeah. So should we begin with the question session?
Yes, yes, please.
So one question is from Dr. Jayati Gupta. Yeah. He wants to know if a patient complains about severe pain in post-auricular region and feels like if something is bursting inside the head and flowing nerve within. So can it be considered as a neurological disorder?
You see, basically temporomandibular joint is a disease, is a syndrome, which basically means there is a set of clinical symptoms. And those set of clinical symptoms and signs will not be same for every patient. Which means depending upon which nerve is closer in which patient, the signs and symptoms would vary. But all these set of clinical conditions are basically considered as temporomandibular joint syndrome. And a patient is very anxious to tell you exactly what his problem is. And when you would have treated many temporomandibular joint disorders, you would be, you know, tired of listening to the same thing again and again. So all these set of diseases, all the pains, full stop, in head, neck, facial region, shoulders, back, knee, sciatica, are all basically dental occlusion gone haywire. And a lot of, if you do a little Googling onto, there is the relationship to the rest of the body, you will find that there is a huge list of diseases, right from gastric disorders, cardiac disorders, neurological disorders, which are connected to the temporomandibular joint. And so you cannot tell primarily a patient with a gastric disorder, come, let me correct your gastric disorder. But if he has come for a dental problem and you are correcting the dental occlusion, then you can definitely observe that whether there will be a correction. And it could be a easy parameter for yourself that when that problem is corrected, then that means your occlusion is in the perfect state.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So next question is from Dr. Sherry Shebi. So can you please explain trigeminal nerve and its importance and its relation?
Sorry, I did not get your question. Can you speak?
Sir, the question is from Dr. Sherry Shebi. Yeah. Can you please explain trigeminal nerve and its importance with relation to temporomandibular joint?
I did explain that foramen ovale is lying anteromedially.
Yes, sir.
And when the disc goes and strikes that here.
Yes, sir. So next question is, sir, how does the left submandibular glands mucoepidermoid carcinomas affect the TMJ?
So that would be better answered by a surgeon, not me.
Yes, sir. So next question is again from Dr. Jayati. She wants to know, sir, can prolonged opening of mouth during extraction may cause bleeding from ear after the procedure gets completed?
I've heard such anecdotes, but I've not seen that. It may be possible when the wall, which is wall between the anterior wall of the external ear and the middle ear, it's very, very thin. So there may be certain possibilities.
Yes, sir. So the next question is,
I would definitely like to say that prolonged opening of the mouth during extraction, or an overextended opening of the mouth, or during the rubber dam, I have seen a lot of patients who were earlier not having any signs and symptoms of facial pains. They developed the proper temporomandibular joint disorders, very difficult to correct. So you have to be, if you're using rubber dam, make sure you're not causing too much of an opening and you're giving a lot of rest to the patient in between. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, can you please put a light on how feasible it is to use a T-scan in regular practice?
We have 7 T-scans and we don't do any case without a T-scan.
Yes.
I've been using it for now more than 11 years now, and no single case is done without a T-scan. Yeah, there are some dentists who have bought T-scan, and if you ask the dental dealer how many scanners have been bought by them, sensors, so it comes to 2 or 3 sensors in a month. We buy almost 100 to 150 sensors every month.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Divya Pandey. Sir, if a patient complains that there is severe pain on one side of the head from 3 to 4 days, and headaches usually happens in the daytime, so what can be the tentative diagnosis and immediate treatment for the same?
See, the short onsets, you should, by the way, almost 75% of the temporomandibular joint diseases are iatrogenic in nature. That is, they have been caused by your dental filling or your dental extraction or the crown that you gave. And so you should track back if the patient has had some kind of a dental event and probably try to get it corrected. And otherwise, hot fermentation, hot and cold fermentation, some muscle relaxant or a painkiller, because when it is of a short duration, it is better to let it settle down. And most of the times it settles down, and do not get into the, do no harm. Don't try to get into bigger things, because if your treatment goes wrong, it can unnecessarily cause something which was coming to the patient, which was going to come, and which now comes, the patient will associate that due to you and not due to the, because temporomandibular joint disease is anyway a progressive disorder. The rate of progression cannot be predicted. That means it will increase over time, unless sometimes they go into a relapse. So you touched it and it went higher. So you are the one who is going to be culprit. So preferably not touch it at such a short duration. Ask them to go for palliative.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, sir. So the next question is, so how do we proceed for a case if there's a clicking sound in TMJ which is associated with pain and without pain? In both the cases, how should we proceed?
See, again, as I said, with pain, without pain, don't interrupt if there is no pain. Full stop.
Yes, sir.
If there is pain and it is of sufficiently long duration, then the first is that the patient has take palliative measures, conservative measures, and if they don't work, then you go into the you improve by correcting the dental occlusion. And when that doesn't work, which rarely happens, only then the surgical things come into action.
Thank you so much for sharing your vast knowledge, sir. And it was a pleasure to have you on the board. I thank you and I congratulate you. I call upon Dr. Anmol Bagadia for concluding this session. Dr. Anmol.
Good evening, everyone, for being with us today across the globe, who are present here today. I would thank Dr. Sanjay Arora, sir, for giving us his valuable time this evening. So thank you for delivering such a wonderfully informative lecture. I would also thank you for being my mentor and guiding me always. I would thank the host and the co-host for today. And I would also like to thank each and every member of my Cynodent team for being supportive in organizing all the events. And I would conclude my session again by thanking Sir. Thank you, sir.
I hope I was useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.